All right, so this is Tuesday, May 24th, sixth period, and we'll get into my third Brovi talk. So you guys already have all of that. Oh, rage! I just got to rage.
Can I click
Do that. There we go. All right. Before I forget on this screen, moving forward, I did find out later there was no camera, that the guy lied to me, but he did catch me. And the reason he caught me is it turns out I was what you call a moron. When I went and did my thievery and I found the aisle, I was correct in the fact that there was no one in that aisle and there was no camera on me, so in theory I should be safe. And I had gone to the last row, and that was where I had pulled it apart and taken it and put stuff on the shelf. But what I did not pay attention to was, like here, this last wall, which I ignored, was a big glass wall, which had pharmacists standing on the other side of it. So apparently when I chose to do my thieving, I did it right in front of them. I just didn't like, oh, it's glass. People can see through glass. I just paid no attention to that. So they were standing there just working. I'm like, is that child stealing that? Right? Is he an idiot? And I was like, and I just walked right in front of him. The guy just came right out and pulled the packaging off the shelf and then just followed me. And so, yay, winning on that part. So the cop was taking me out, and so going through the double doors. I remember he pushed open the second double door. And as we are exiting, going out through the double doors, I remember the last time being there was freedom, and him taking me through there, realizing that this was not freedom anymore. And his cop car was sitting out there, and the lights were going, but the siren was not. And so as we walked from those doors to the car, looking to my right, which was the length of the front of the building, to the very edge of the corner, which like went down like this little alley, and there were 4 heads peeked around the corner. And it was 4 of my friends on the wrestling team who stayed to watch me get arrested, because that's what friends do. They stick around to watch your most embarrassing moment. And so it was like a little totem pole of these little heads that were sitting there watching as I walked into it. And it was one of those little depressing, and the cop saw it, and he thought it was funny. He was like, you got a criminal fan club. And I'm like, you're a jerk. And so he had to get me into the car. Because I was still handcuffed, I couldn't get into the car myself, so he opened the door. And remember, as he got me into it, there was a shotgun bolted into the front seat where the dash is, and it was like just pointed right there for like emergency shotgunning of people. And so as I got in, I had to move my head around it. I was like, whoa! I was like, oh, that's kind of dangerous. And then I sat down, and I couldn't do the seatbelt because no hands. And so he leaned in and snapped the seatbelt on me and stood back. And before he shut the door, it's weird, the little things that just don't leave you years later. He leaned back and he goes, it's a short ride to the police station. Try not to steal anything while you're in my car. And then slammed the door. It was like, it was just deflating. It was a mean thing to say, but it made an impact on me. And then he got in the car, and it was a short ride. In Noblesville, things are really close together. It was like 2 or 3 minutes from there to the police station. I remember getting to the police station, and I don't remember getting out. I don't remember going in. I know at some point he took off my cuffs, but I don't remember him taking them off. I remember the next thing I really remember that stayed with me was sitting in his office. It was like a little tiny closet of a room, and it had a big wooden desk, and he was on the other side. I remember having to give him all my information, and he was typing it in, and then he called my mom. I remember like listening to the conversation. I didn't call my mom, he did, and it was just like, yeah, we picked up your son, he's in custody of the police station. No, ma'am, he was arrested for shoplifting. Yes, ma'am, you're going to have to come down and pick him up. And like not hearing my mom yell, just I could hear that part of the conversation, and just being like, oh, this is not going to go well. This is not going to go well. And then he hung up, and then I just had to wait. Like he filled out, I don't know, policey reports, and I just had to sit there the entire time. And I remember as I'm sitting there waiting, looking around the office and just trying to distract myself because I was trying hard not to cry. Because that's what you do when you get arrested and you're sitting in the police station waiting for your parents to pick you up. Crying seems like a solid option. And I remember looking to my right, and the wall was full of wanted posters. And I thought that was cool because I'd only seen wanted posters on TV. And I was like, ooh. And so I was like, small high point. And I remember I was like sitting like just looking and checking out all the different wanted posters, and they had like their crimes and how long they've been wanted. And I thought that was neat. And the cop looked up and saw me and watched me looking at the posters. And then another thing that sticks with me. He goes, hey, so you're looking at the wall there, are you? I go, yeah. And he goes, you're going to be up there someday, aren't you? And I was like, no. And he goes, that's what every criminal says, kid. And I was like, oh. And it's just like, you're such a jerk. And it was just that deflating. And so I decided, like, from now on, like, I'm just going to stare at the floor. And I refused to look at him or around. I just stared at the ground. And I have no idea how long I was there until my mom finally showed up to get me. And I remember my mom not yelling at me. It was much worse. She was disappointed. And when you get along with your parents, or you get along with anyone that you respect, that disappointment's much worse than getting yelled at. And that's what it was. She just walked in and she was like, is it true? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, I'm so disappointed. And I was like, I know. She was like, no, you don't. And I was like, oh, that made it worse. And then going out, I remember they had to check me out, like little police station-y stuff. And I remember going out to the car. We had a gray Pontiac Bonneville. I remember sitting in the front seat, the passenger seat. My mom drove, and her talking to me, and not yelling, just that whole, what did we do wrong? This is not who we raised. What kind of son are you? Why would you choose to do this? Breath spray. What is wrong with you? And it was just that, and not the yelling, just that shocked disappointment, quiet talking. And I remember sitting in that front seat, and I had my feet up on the dashboard. And I'd wrap my arms around my knees, and I was leaning against the cold window. And I remember I could still feel that cold window like smashed against my face there. And I just stared out and watched the trees go by while my mom was talking. I didn't really answer. I just listened to everything she said. And we got home, and she was like, I think you should head up to your room. I'm like, oh, that's probably a good idea. And so I went up to my room, and I remember laying down on my bed and staring up at the ceiling, and just the things that go through a person's head. I didn't know what my dad was going to think when he got home. My dad was not an angry or a violent person, but I love my dad. And so it was going to be highly disappointed in me. Worse than that, what my friends going to say, because now they all know about it. And of course, this was before social media, so there's not like they were going to post or talk about it, but I knew when I got to school the next day it was going to be rough. And speaking of school, what are my teachers going to say? Because I know they're going to find out about it, so our teacher's going to look at me differently. They're going to look at me as this kid that's now a thief, and I was arrested. I was in advanced classes, and I was like, do I get to stay in advanced classes? Is this going to affect college? Do I get to stay in school? And I wondered about girls. I'm like, is any girl going to want to go out with me? Because here I am, 14-year-old, and I've been arrested, and I have a record, and they're like, oh, you're scummy. I'm not going out with you. So I was like, all of that stuff's going through my head while I'm staring at the ceiling. And it was one of the darkest days of my 40 years that I can remember feeling that down and that depressed and feeling like there was no moving forward from it, that there was no future for me. And I was there probably an hour before my dad got home, and I remember him coming home and talking to my mom downstairs, and then they eventually came up to talk to me. And they were both very calm. When they walked in, they're like, honey, we need to talk. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of figured that was coming. And they sat down on my bed with me, and they're like, to start off with, you're grounded. And I was like, yeah, I was kind of guessing that one. They're like, indefinitely for now, because we've never had to deal with this before, so we're not really sure how long to ground you for. And I was like, okay. And they're like, and as far as punishment goes, that's it for now. And I was like, it's not what I was expecting. And they go, I don't think you understand exactly what you've done, dear. And I was like, what do you mean? They go, everyone's opinion changes of you now. We can't trust you anymore. Every time someone sees you, this is going to be what they think. Making you go forward in life, making you confront school tomorrow, making you go to wrestling practice, making you confront the people in your life with this knowledge, that's more of a punishment than anything we can do to you. Life punishes you now, much more than anything we can do. So we're not here to punish you. We're here to support you. And you have to understand that we love you, and you have to understand that we'll be here for you, and the fact that we will continue to love you, even if we're disappointed in you, and even though we're disappointed in your actions. But realize you're strong enough to get through this, but you're going to need to, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. And they were right. there was not much of a punishment you could give me that was going to be worse than what came the next day. If that night was my darkest night, my darkest moment, that next day was probably one of my toughest days in my 40 years of waking up and not wanting the world to continue. Wanting something to make it all stop and end before I had to move forward, but knowing that there was nothing that was going to stop it. I had to confront what was going to be coming. And getting on the bus, and no one on the bus really knew yet, because once again, before social media, before kids could really talk, no one really knew there. So being on the bus on the way to school was like my last moment of freedom. And then I got to school, and people knew. Even though it was not social media, even though there was not ways of kids to call each other, there was no cell phones, kids knew, and they talked, and it spread fast. And it was as soon as I got to school and walking through the hallways, even kids I didn't know knew me. And it was the turning and talking in the hallways. And as soon as I got close, the being quiet, and it's like the turning and staring at me. And then as soon as I passed, the giggling and laughing, going into every classroom. And when I did, they would all stop and turn to look at me, and then just watch to see what I was going to do. And knowing like there were eyes on me everywhere I went, and they were judging eyes. And everyone's viewpoint of me was different. And it's hard to put into words how that feels as you go through the day. And the names came, calling me Five Fingers, calling me thief, calling me Banaka, breath spray, anything they could come up with, because kids are mean. That's how kids are. And so those I could handle. The kids making fun of me, the kids yelling names, it is what it is. My friends gave me a hard time, but that's what friends do. And they didn't do it in a mean way. They do it because that's what friends do to make you a better person. What's weird is it's the small things people did that had the bigger impact, the things that I don't think they did on purpose. Walking into my advanced English class, I remember coming in, and there were girls in there that I'd known for years, that we'd had classes together. And when they looked at me, it was the look in their eye of distrust, hatred. I don't know. It's hard to put into words, but it was just the way they looked at me hurt. And then as I walked past them, they would move their stuff from like one side of the desk to the other, as if I would steal their stuff as I walked by. And it wasn't like a looking at me and be like, ugh. It was just this whole, they moved it out of subconsciously to get it away from me, because of that's where their brain was. And it was knowing that these people who I thought were my friends, this was how they viewed me now. And it was a rough day to get through. And then it got worse, because I got to wrestling practice. And apparently coaches don't like it when you embarrass the team. Who knew? And so I found out later that how my coach found out about me getting arrested was that day we had the wrestling meet the previous day. That was why I was after school being a hoodlum. And on the bus ride to the meet, he was going through calling off attendance. And apparently he got to my name, and he was like, "Broviak," and I couldn't answer because I was busy sitting in the back of the store crying. And he got to my name, and the other kids started laughing, and they're like, "Ha ha ha ha!" And he was like, "Where's Broviak?" And they're like, "He got arrested." He was like, "Seriously, where?" He's like, "No, I think he's in jail." Like, "No, where?" He's like, "No, we're not kidding. He got arrested. It was the greatest thing ever. He was shoplifting. We saw him get into the cop car." And so they spit all this information out, and apparently the coach did not enjoy that particular information. He didn't find it nearly as funny as the rest of us should. And so the next day, when I got to practice, the coach didn't address it right away. So I got there, and I knew all the kids, or the wrestlers, were staring at me and stuff like that. And I was just like, I'm going to get through it. I'm like, I'm going to be strong, and I can do it. And so the coach was like, "All right, I changed up our plans for today. What we're going to do today is throwing practice." If you're not a wrestler, aren't going to be familiar with what throwing practice is. But throwing is when you partner up and you practice picking someone into the air and throwing them onto the ground. And oftentimes in wrestling, your goal is to hurt the other person when you throw them, because that way it prevents them from being able to fight back. And so the coach decided it was throwing practice. I'm like, ugh. So I was like, all right. And so I picked a friend of mine as my partner. And the coach goes, "Broviak, I've already got a partner for you." And I was like, "You do, coach?" And he goes, "Uh-huh." He's like, "You get Craig." Craig was a senior and outweighed me by 20-some pounds of all muscle, and he was scary. And Craig looked at me and just went, and I went, "Hey, Craig." And so Craig got to start throwing me, and Craig put his effort into it. He is sort of would step into it, and it's like, and my feet would go flying into the air and come slamming back down. And then when he got tired of doing that, because I would make funny little squeaky sounds every time I hit the ground, he got to the point where he would lift me. And then as I came down, he would jump into the air to allow him to land on me, and it would knock all the wind out of me. He was like, and he was like, again. I'm like, and I had to over and over again. And I mean, it was bruised, and eventually we had to switch, and I had to throw Craig. Except the fact I couldn't throw Craig because Craig was bigger than me and heavier than me and angry at me. So I was like, all right, my turn. And I'd grab like, all right. And Craig was like, no. And coach was like, he can't throw you, Craig. I guess it's your turn again. I'm like, come on. And then Craig, it was 2 hours. It felt like I got pummeled by a steamroller. It was awful. And then practice ended. I'm like, hey, I made it through. I'm like, I'm alive. But it wasn't over. We got to the end, and the coach sort of called us all together. Here's a little ending of the practice speech. He's like, all right, apparently there's people on our team who don't respect this team and make poor choices that reflect poorly on all of us. And I think certain individuals need to learn and understand that's not what we tolerate on this team. And I'm going to leave it up to you, gentlemen, to make sure something like this never happens again. All right? And I go, yes, coach. He goes, all right. And then he walked out of the wrestling room and shut the door behind him. And I was in there with the entire team. And this was a whole bunch of seniors, 4 years older than me, who all looked at me and smiled. And I knew it was not going to go well. And it did not. We had what's called a wrestling dummy. And a wrestling dummy is this big, it's like a stuffed animal, but it's a stuffed person. It weighed 150 pounds. And so you could practice throwing it. And it was just this dummy that looked like that. And they picked me up and carried me over to the wrestling dummy and then got out mat tape. And mat tape is what you use to tape these 800-pound mats together so they can't slide. It's about that wide, and it is some of the strongest and stickiest stuff you'll ever see. And they held me down to it, and they taped me to it. They wrapped my arms and my legs and my body to it, and then went around my forehead and taped it to the little fake head that was there. And they took turns throwing me, just picking me up in the air and throwing me as high as they could, and then I would just land. It was like, and it hurt so badly. And then they would sort of domino me, where they'd stand me up and they'd run and like launch themselves at me, and then I'd go flying backwards. And they'd see how far they could make me slide, and they'd hit me. It was awful. Didn't cry, go me. Wanted to cry a lot until they got bored with me after 15, 20 minutes, and they just threw me in the corner. Into the corner of the wrestling room, upside down. My feet are up in the air, arms out to the side, head hair hanging up like that. And then they just turned out the lights and then left, and just left me in this room. And they had no intention of coming back for me. And it was one of those moments of self-reflection, right? I just sort of stood there thinking, this is where my choices have led me to. And I realized I had no one to blame it on. This was all through me. I shoplifted. I stole things. There was no one for me to blame it on. There was no one else who was responsible. It was all me. And these were my choices that got me there. And it was one of those, you either let this be a thing that breaks you, or you let this be a thing that makes you stronger. And it was sort of one of those moments where I decided that it wasn't going to break me, that I was going to make this be a thing that made me stronger, and that I was going to move forward from it. And I was in there for 20, 25 minutes before one of my friends snuck back in. He waited for all the older kids to leave, and then he snuck in with a pocket knife and then cut off the tape. Which, by the way, I was part bear even as a child, and so when they took off the tape, it also took off most of my hair on my arms and legs, which was frighteningly painful. And so I remember going out to my car and my mom being there and wanted to pick me up, and she was like, so how was today? I was like, it was awful. She goes, yeah. She goes, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And I was like, that's uplifting, because today was pretty bad. I'm like, I'm not sure it's going to get much worse. Luckily, it actually did not get much worse. That was sort of the low point, and it kind of went up from there. Eventually, I did have to go to court. If you've ever been to Noblesville, there's a town square. It has this old building in the middle of it, that was the courthouse I had to go to in front of a judge. Much like you see in TV, except I didn't have a lawyer because I wasn't trying to get out of anything. I was just admitting to it. And so I had to go in front of this judge. And the judge had me stand up in front of him, and he read through all the information and the crime I did. And I remember like, breath spray? And I was like, I was dumb. He was like, no kidding. And then I remember saying, well, you have no prior arrests, nothing on your record. He's like, you've not been in trouble with the police before. And I was like, I haven't? I haven't. Because apparently when I was 7, they didn't actually put that on my record. They just told me they did, but apparently it wasn't there, or they don't talk. I don't know, but all I know is he said I was clean. I was like, I'm not going to fight that. I'm like, go me. He says, you also have good grades. I did. My freshman year I had all A's. And I was like, I do, sir. And he goes, all right, so here's what we're going to do for you, son, to help make you a better person. And I go, yes, sir. He goes, we're going to give you what's called deferred probation. Do you know what that means? And I go, I have no idea. He goes, it means that you're not going to be punished right here at this moment. We're going to put off your punishment until the next time you get caught. And the next time you get caught, we're going to punish you double. If you're out with friends past curfew and a cop runs your name, I'm putting a note in here that you are not let off for anything. If your name pops up on any police's radar for anything, you are to be taken into custody, and you're going to be held in custody at the police station until your parents come pick you up, and then you're going to immediately show up in this court again. And when you show up in this court again, I'm going to prosecute you, and I'm going to punish you to the full extent of whatever this new crime is, and I'm going to punish you for whatever this old crime is, regardless of what it might be. So if you ever get picked up by the police, you will not get out of whatever it is. Your other friends might. If you're at a party and the police run names and they let other people go free, they get to go free. You do not get to go free because of this choice you made. Do you understand? I'm like, I understand, sir. That sounds like a great idea, sir. He goes, but if you make it to 18, the day you turn 18, I expunge this from your record, and it disappears like it never existed, as long as you don't get in trouble before then. But if you get in trouble on the day you're 17 and 364 days old, all of this comes crashing back down on you. And I'm like, I understand. And then I was let go with the understanding that if I ever got picked up again, it all would come back. Which, looking back on it, helped me. Because it helped me make good choices throughout high school. Because I hung out with kids who didn't make good choices. I was very much, as I told you guys before, like Cherry in The Outsiders, and the fact that I had my good kid friends, I had my bad kid friends, and I didn't give up my bad kid friends, even though I knew that they weren't making good choices, and they drank, and they smoked, and they did drugs, because I'd been friends with them for so long. It just wasn't in me to stop talking to them. But I didn't drink throughout all of high school. I didn't drink because I never went to the parties because I was paranoid. It's like, I can't go to the parties. So they get busted. Like, I'm not going to jail. Like, ain't going to happen to me. And so I refused with that, and I refused to make those choices. That and the fact that I had a bad history in my family of addiction. And almost everyone in my family has been through addiction and rehab, and I was paranoid about that too. So I was like, I'm not touching any of it. So that got me through high school without getting in trouble because of that. And there's one other thing I remember, which was an odd thing that still stands out to me to this day. And it was a couple weeks later. Another day we had a wrestling meet. And whenever we had wrestling meets, after that, I did not leave the school. I just sat in the back hallway and did homework. Like all my other friends would go out to McDonald's, into the store. Like I was like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm like, I'm just going to stay here and do homework. And I was like, I'm not getting in trouble again. And I remember one day I was sitting in this back hallway doing homework when I look up to my left, and there's this kid walking down the hallway. And it was a kid I knew because I'd been in school with him before, but he was a scary kid. Because Noblesville has some thug kids that come through there. And he was older than me, been held back, but was in my grade. And he, like in junior high, had gotten kicked out for smoking on school property and picking fights with a teacher. And he did not like this kid at all. And I remember looking up and seeing him to the left and seeing him walk down the hallway. And they're like, it's just me sitting there. And I'm like, oh, poopy. So I'm like, I'm just not going to look up. I'm just going to sit here and do my homework. I'm going to be a good kid. I'm going to make good choices. And I don't want to see him. And I could hear he was wearing cowboy boots. And I still hear him, ka-chickity, 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 as he's walking up. And then his feet like walk right where I am, and they stop right in front of me. And it was just that, oh, are you kidding me? And then they just spin. So they're facing me. And I was like, don't acknowledge him, don't acknowledge him, don't acknowledge him. And he goes, aren't you Broviac? I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, so much for that not acknowledging. So I'm like, so I look up, and he was just as scary up close. And I was like, yeah, I'm Broviac. He goes, didn't you get arrested a couple weeks ago for stealing breath spray? And I was like, yeah, I did. I can't deny it. And he goes, yeah, that's what I thought. And I was like, do you know what he was going to say? I was ready for it. I mean, I'd been through a lot, but I was strong and I could take it. But what he said, I was not expecting. And he goes, life sucks right now, doesn't it? I go, yeah, it does. He goes, kids making fun of you? I go, yeah. He goes, rough at home, huh? I was like, yeah, it is. He goes, yeah, it'll get better. I went, what? He goes, it'll get better for you. Just give it some time. I went, okay. He goes, when I was in junior high, I stole a whole box of pencils from a store, and I got picked up for it. And it was one of the dumbest things I've ever done. My dad beat me for it. My friends made fun of me for it. And I didn't hear the end of it for a while. And it was awful. And I just went, okay. He goes, but you give it some time, and kids will forget about it, and they'll move on. And it happened to me. Somebody else will be stupid, and they'll pay attention to that, and they'll forget all about you. You just have to stay strong until then. I go, okay. He goes, all right, man. Be cool. And then I just walked away. I was like, okay. The weirdest thing, the scariest guy I'd ever been that close to. And that's what he had to say to me. And he was right. It was some of the best advice I got. It was. A week or two later, someone else did something stupid, and people stopped paying attention to me, and my arrest became a thing of the past. And the only people who brought it up were like the jerk kids who always bring up stuff like that because they're jerk kids and no one pays attention to, and my friends, because that's what friends do. They keep making fun of you forever after. But the rest of the kids, like, they stopped caring. The looks in class didn't happen anymore. And it's the fact that this random, scary thug kid, of all the things he could have done, the fact that he took a moment out of his day to tell me that when he didn't have to, and he could have ignored me and kept walking, it really made an impression on me that still stuck with me years later. I really thought I had him pegged and knew what kind of person he was, and I didn't. And it wasn't like after that we became friends and like high-fived in the hallway. He still glared at me whenever he saw me after that, and I was like, you're still scary. But like that moment, he was a human, and it was really, really nice of him. And I didn't get arrested again for 4 years. I made it all the way until I was 18. Yay! So I got through that and then ended up going to college at IU. And I got through all of high school without drinking. Hung out with kids who drank. I didn't do drugs in high school, and I hung out with the kids who did. And I got to college, and I made new friends, and they were great friends on my college floor. In the dorm, you meet new people. And I met all of these new kids on my dorm floor. Hang on. I have until 1:50, right?
Yeah.
Sweet, I have 5 minutes, perfect. And so I met all these new kids on my dorm floor. And one of them was a kid, one named Fish, Joshua Fisher, but his nickname was Fish. And this other kid named Mariah Simmons, his nickname was Mo. And so November-ish, I did not drink. A lot of them kept going out and like drinking on the weekends and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm not going to go with them. I'm like, why not? And I'm like, I got arrested when I was in high school, and even though it was supposed to be off my record, I was like, I don't want to push things, so I'm just not going to join you. And they were really nice about it. They're not jerks or anything. They're like, all right, that sounds cool, not a problem. But Mo's birthday was coming up. He was turning 19, and they were going to throw him a party. I'm like, hey, we're going to throw Mo a party here on our dorm floor. We're going to go out and buy a whole bunch of beer. Are you interested? And I'm like, I don't want to go to the party because throwing it on a dorm floor seems stupid because it's double illegal because, one, we're all underage, and two, you can't have alcohol anywhere on IU campus. So you're like, oh, let's double down on stupidity. So I'm like, I'm going to pass up on that one, but I'll give you guys money. Like, I had a job. I was like, I can donate to it. And like, all right, that's nice of you. So I gave them like $20. They could go out and get beer and stuff like that because I felt a little guilty about it. So instead, the night of his party, I set up a date with this girl I had a crush on. She was at this party. I was going to this school party I was going to go to. It was like on the campus, like a disco 80s night. And I was going to go meet her there. But then the day of, so this was a Friday, the day of, Fish comes by and he's like, hey, the party's tonight. I'm like, yeah, still not going. He's like, yeah, not a problem. He's like, but we have an issue. We have a favor to ask. I'm like, well, what favor do you have? And Fish goes, listen, I have a guy to buy the beer. I'm like, good for you. He goes, but I don't have a car to go get it in. And I was the only one on our dorm floor who had a car there because I had saved up money and had brought my car down to IU, and it was this little 2-seater sports car, a Mazda RX-7, and it was awesome. But it just had the driver, the passenger, then it had this back area which like you could store groceries in, but it was like a big glass bubble, and it was all flat. We took friends in it because we were teenagers and stupid. And so I would drive, and I had a friend sit there, and then we would pack like 4 or 5 other teenagers in the back of it. And it was an area about the size of a large suitcase. And they would all be packed in like the entire time. Like every time I hit a bump in the road, they go ding ding ding, like you hear like their heads like hit the glass, and it was awesome. And so I had issues even back then. And so he was like, can I borrow your car to take the guy out to go buy the beer, because we can't walk it back. It's going to be way too much. And I was like, I did not want Fish to borrow my car, because Fish was not known for making the best choices. Not a highly responsible person. And I was like, I don't know about that. And he's like, please. He's like, if we don't borrow the car, he's like, we're not going to be able to throw the party. The whole thing's going to fall apart tonight. And I was like, oh, pressure. I was like, how about this? I don't want to get in trouble with my parents for letting someone else drive my car, so I'll drive instead. Because I didn't want to have the party not happen. I was trying to be nice. I felt guilty for not going to the party for this kid that was my friend. So I was like, I'll drive and I'll take you guys around, stuff like that, and I just want to go to the party afterwards. He's like, oh, that's awesome. He's like, you're so cool. And I'm like, I know. And he was like, well, it'll be me, Fish was going to go, and then the 21-year-old. Because the 21-year-old had to buy everything, and I didn't know the guys. It was a bit kind of awkward. It's like him and I driving. He was like, who are you? So instead, Fish went, and he was just going to sit in that little back area, like all like cramped up. And so I took him out that night, and we drove around to a bunch of different liquor stores. Highly illegal. We'd park in the parking lot, and the 21-year-old would go in and buy beer, and he bought big old cases of it, like you would for like Mountain Dew or Coke. You know, there's 24 packs and 30 packs. He would buy those and then bring them and put them in the back of my car, and we would throw the blanket over them. And while we're sitting in the parking lot, I would just like cover my face. I'm like, oh, you can't see me because I'm only 18. And then he'd come out, and we'd drive to the next one, because you can only buy so much beer at a certain location. And they bought like $200 worth of beer, and it just the whole back of my car was just packed with it. We threw a blanket over it, but I mean, it was just everywhere, to the point where my car like started driving like it was uphill the entire time, because the back started to fall down. And I got more and more nervous every time, like, oh, let's go home. We got enough beer. And they're like, oh, I don't think we have enough. I'm like, we really have enough. And so eventually I was like, let's go back. So we drove back to my dorm. In IU, I lived at Wilkie, which is this huge building here. It's like a giant hotel. We lived up on the 11th or 12th floor, I don't remember which one it was. And we were up there, and there was this back parking lot, and that's where we had to park. But we actually parked almost exactly where that silver car is, which is crazy. But we had to get it from there all the way to here, and then up an elevator. And so we had duffel bags. We're going to throw all the beer into a duffel bag and then carry it up there, because if anyone saw us with it, we'd get in a lot of trouble, because you can't have it when you're underage or on campus. And so I parked facing this direction, so my back was out here. And we popped open the trunk, and they were throwing the beer into the duffel bags. And I'm sitting there like watching them in the back of my car, and I'm like, I don't want to be here because this is really bad. And because I'm like, so I came up with an idea. I go, hey, why don't I go up and get the other guys to come down and help? And that way you guys won't have to carry it yourself. They're like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm like, yeah, great idea. It's not like I'm running away. And I'm like, so I'll go up there and grab them and then just forget to come back down. And so I was like, oh. And so I left, and the whole parking lot was full of cars, because it was like nighttime. It was really busy, so not empty like this. And so I was crossing it, and I was going towards this little pathway here, and I got to right about there, when off to my left, in the darkness, a voice goes, hey, what are you doing? And I look over, and there's 2 cops just walking through the grass. I'm like, are you kidding me? Because apparently they have just random cops that just walk around trying to find idiot kids doing